Hi, everybody. We're just going to give a few more minutes to see if anybody wants to join us. And then Chantrella and I will begin the webinar on undergraduate financial aid. See you in just a moment. All right, I guess we'll go ahead and get started. You ready, Chantrella?
Yes, I am.
All right. So thanks, everybody, for coming to the Tulane School of Professional Advancement Financial Aid webinar for undergraduates. There's going to be a lot of information available here, which is all of it is available online. And we're going to try to tape this so that it will be able to, you will be able to access it on YouTube later, hopefully, too. So I guess we'll begin with some introductions. My name is Vanessa Rodriguez, and I am the Assistant Dean for Student Support and Success here at the Tulane School of Professional Advancement. Basically, that means I oversee the stuff that's non-academic that has to do with students. And Chantrella, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chantrella Baptiste. I'm a senior financial aid counselor here at Tulane, and I am one of the facilitating counselors that assists with outreach programs and also with questions about the School of Professional Advancement. And I'm also a graduate of the School of Professional Advancement as well, so I welcome everyone.
Thank you so much. Yes, we're very proud of Chantrella. All right, so agenda, we just went through our introductions. We're going to talk quickly and highlight some specific areas that we think are the most important. First of all, who is your financial aid counselor and how do you find that out? Talking about the FAFSA, the SoPA addendum, that is something that you actually have to fill out as well if you're going to apply to financial aid. Get some notifications about timing, when your notifications will be sent, PELL grants, federal loan limits, satisfactory academic progress, which is something actually a lot of people don't necessarily realize in the beginning when they first get their financial aid. And enrollment changes, as well a handy dandy little checklist that financial aid put together, especially for SoPA students. So I guess we'll get started. I just wanted to let you know that if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat function at the bottom of your screen, and we'll make sure to get to them. All right, so moving forward. So Chantrella, how does a student find out who their financial aid counselor is? And what does that financial aid counselor do?
Okay, that's a good question. The financial aid information is available on our website, on our webpage for Tulane, and students, it goes according to the student's last name. And so because we have so many students at our wonderful schools and in different programs, it goes according to your last name. And you can find that information on our website. We are available Monday through Friday, also available via email as well. So you go to our webpage and you will find that information according to your last name. So it'd be at financialaid.tulane.edu. Meet us, and then you'll click on counselors, and there's the undergraduate information.
Okay, and the advisor is the person who's responsible for going through your application and letting you know where you stand and all that stuff. Is that right?
That is correct. So once you are accepted to the university, even if you're not yet in the program, but you have some questions, you can touch bases with any of us in the Student Financial Aid Office. And what we will do is answer any questions that you have about your FAFSA, how to start that process from beginning to end. So that's what we're here for.
Great. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I know sometimes this can seem a little bit confusing, and y'all can definitely shed some light on these things. All right, so I know the main thing when we think of financial aid, we think of federal financial aid, which is the primary source of aid for most students, right?
That is correct.
So where do the students fill out the FAFSA? What is it? What are the main deadlines that they have to think about?
Okay, when you are thinking about financial aid, most instances students immediately think of the FAFSA, and the FAFSA is a federally processed application through federal student aid. So the acronym FAFSA, a lot of people get confused. It's the free application for federal student aid. So it is a free application. There are no ties to having to pay to complete this application. You would complete it online with the government, and once that information is completed, they make it available to the schools. If you're interested in aid for the summer, you want to get that application done actually as soon as possible. Right now, that deadline, or priority deadline rather, is April 15th for summer and fall and spring. If you're opting maybe for just the spring, then you want to complete it sometime in the fall semester. All applications are available October 1st. And you would provide our school code onto that FAFSA, so that would ensure that Tulane receives it.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. So the deadlines are kind of coming up pretty quickly, right, for summer and fall? Yeah, so we got to get cracking. All right, so speaking of deadlines, there is an addendum also that has to be filled out by a certain time. Tell us about that.
Yes, the addendum is a SoPA addendum for undergraduates. And with that application, it is online. So you would go to our website as well and complete that application. And what it does is capture the information from a student with regards to how many hours that you plan to enroll each semester of enrollment and the program that you're going to be enrolled in. So that actually helps, because that kind of gives some insight to the type of aid or how much aid you may qualify for. So in addition to the FAFSA, you have to complete the School of Professional Advancement addendum form for financial aid.
Okay, and that's basically because, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the School of Professional Advancement, we have kind of more liberal ability to take 2 classes, take 4 classes. So there's a wide range of possibilities. So it gives the information to the financial aid office about how many classes an individual student is going to take, so that they can make an informed decision about aid. Is that right?
That is correct. Reporting that information on that application, like I said, gives us an idea of how much aid you may qualify and the types of aid depending on the program that you're enrolled in. So like I said, again, in addition to the FAFSA, you want to make sure that you complete that addendum so that we can make a more informed decision and give you more of some concise information about your award package. And you want to complete that. If, like I said, if you're going to go for summer, that form will be available April 15th. If you're going to go fall and spring, it too will be available during that same time. And it's all under financial aid tulane.edu.
Okay. Yeah. So it's available now, but you have to submit it by the 15th. Is that right?
Yes, that's a priority deadline, so you're not behind.
Great. Thank you so much. All right, let's see. So I know we've said this 100 times, but I just want people to get it in their brain. April 15th, April 15th, April 15th. So what happens if you can't submit it by April 15th?
Well, it's not a deal breaker per se. We just highly recommend that date because it's kind of coinciding with the tax date when taxes are due. So that's kind of like why we've chosen to stick with the April 15th deadline. So it's not a requirement that you have to have it done by April 15th, but it's highly recommended so that you can have an idea of what your award package will be before the semester begins.
And if there's too much of a delay, it's possible that you won't receive the aid in time, correct?
Correct. And with billing due and things of that nature, we want to make sure all of our students are aware of what their financial aid will be and make necessary precautions or be proactive with the process itself. So yes.
Great, thank you. All right, so you fill all this stuff in, you're a student. What happens after that? How do you know what's going on? How do you get the loan amounts given to you, dispersed? Walk us through that a little bit.
Yes. So after you are accepted, congratulations, you're a SoPA student. And it's like, okay, you've completed your FAFSA, you've completed the addendum. So once we get that information and you have been accepted to the university, what we do is notify all students electronically. And how we do so is through your Tulane email account, as well as what we call the Gibson portal. So that's where you would be able to view your financial aid, as well as accept or decline any aid that you don't want or do want, or even adjust that aid. So you want to make sure you visit your Gibson portal, because in addition to the aid, depending on the forms of aid that you accept, for example, any federal student loans, if you're a first-time borrower or a new borrower, you have additional steps that must be completed to go along with those loans. And it would all be on your Gibson portal under financial aid requirements. So as a new borrower, you have your entrance counseling and master promissory note. So you definitely want to make sure that after you complete those 2 steps, to visit your Gibson portal so that you can see what information is needed, if additional, and how to move that process along.
Okay, so it'll tell you, if I'm a student, it'll give me kind of like a, you haven't done this yet, you still need to do it kind of thing in Gibson?
Yes, it'll be under your financial aid to-do list or requirements list on your Gibson portal. Yep.
That's awesome. All right, so the disbursement, how does that work?
Okay, for the disbursement, for students who are attending fall and spring, you would have your half for fall, half for spring aid. If you are attending for summer, then you would have your summer aid along. What we want students to understand with School of Professional Advancement, it's kind of tricky, but you have some students who attend for the summer as a beginning semester. So you want to be mindful about that, because that does impact your fall and spring aid. So if you're attending like summer, fall, spring, just know that your summer aid could impact how much aid you have remaining to utilize for fall and spring. And that's a good thing that SoPA allows students to do, which is attend for the summer as a beginning semester. So just be mindful of that.
No, that's important to know for sure. All right, moving on. And once this, so you got the disbursement. If there are refunds, how is that process?
Good. Okay, so what they're called are actually excess credit checks or refund checks. After you've accepted all of your aid and it goes towards your billing, your tuition and fee billing, what the accounts receivable office does is process all of that information, all of that funding. And if you have any funding remaining, the accounts receivable department would notify you and inform you that you can set up direct deposit, so that that funding can be directly deposited to your account. And you can request that information or contact student account services with our offices, and they'll let you know what else that you'll have to do. They actually are a separate office from us, but they will be able to tell you the next steps in order to obtain that refund or that excess credit.
Okay, great. And again, this all goes through the Tulane email account. So I would assume, and we say this from a student affairs end too, check your Tulane email account several times a day, yes. Right?
Yes, okay. And it's important, yes.
Yes, awesome, thanks. Yeah, I cannot stress that hard enough. All right, so Pell Grants, this is something that a lot of people qualify for. I know it's a little tricky, but can you give us kind of like an umbrella bird's eye view of Pell Grants and eligibility?
Yes, so the Pell Grant eligibility is determined by the federal government. So on your FAFSA form, after you provide the government or federal student aid with all of the information on the application, what results you get, it actually tells you the forms of aid that you qualify for. And one of those forms of aid could be the federal Pell Grant. And with the federal Pell Grant, depending on how many hours you're enrolled, will determine how much of that Pell Grant you can receive. But we want to keep in mind that the government is monitoring how much Pell Grant a student can receive. There is now a limit to how long a student can receive Pell Grant if you're deemed eligible by a federal student aid program, and that limit is 600%. Students kind of make that equivalent to 6 years. So you just want to be mindful of that. There is a limit to how long you can receive Pell Grants if you are eligible. So just keep that in mind.
Okay, yeah, that's important. And do they measure it like, if you started school in 2001, say, and took a break for 3 years and then came back in 2004, those break years, do they count or no?
Those break years do not count. It's
Okay.
just every year that you're receiving federal
That's
Pell
what they
grants.
count.
So there could be some years that you complete the FAFSA, but because of your income and things that you report on the FAFSA, you may be deemed ineligible for the Pell Grant. So that year would not count. But every year that you're deemed eligible and we award you and you accept the Pell Grant, those years count. But the years you're not enrolled, they do not count towards the 6 years or 600% of eligibility.
Okay. That's important to know because I know a lot of our students have different circumstances at different times, and sometimes they might have to take a break and come back. And so that's good to know. All right. So let's talk about limits for undergraduate students. I know they're different for graduate students. That's a whole nother webinar. For undergraduate students, I think it is dependent primarily on whether you're classified as a dependent or an independent, right? Can you tell us first about what's the difference between those two classifications?
Yes. So the difference between dependent and independent is actually determined by the federal student aid program. But just basically saying a dependent student is utilizing their parents' information. So they did not meet the criteria from the federal student aid program to be deemed independent. And they have a series of questions on the FAFSA that determine whether or not a student is dependent or independent. So you definitely want to make sure you're paying attention to those questions on the FAFSA because the federal student aid program will determine eligibility. But basically, a dependent student was determined eligible for federal aid because by using their parents' information. An independent student did not have to use their parents' information. So that's just the basic difference between the two classifications. And then moving forward with the forms of federal student loans that you're eligible for, your dependency status is what the federal student aid calls it. The dependency status will determine how much student loans you can receive in conjunction with your financial need as well.
Okay, so clarify for us the difference between maximum unsubsidized and maximum subsidized.
Okay, good question. When the government says maximum, that means over the course of your lifetime of your undergraduate student career. So for your undergraduate career, meaning the years that you're in the undergraduate program, the maximum you have is to borrow for subsidized student loans, which is the one that does not accrue interest while you're in school. The maximum is $23,000. So you want to be mindful as well, just like the Pell Grant, there's also a set time or set funding that you can receive over a period of time. So it can run out. So you just want to make sure that you're borrowing conservatively if you don't need the funding because it's a set limit. For dependent students with the unsubsidized SAP loan, which is the one that does accrue interest while you're in school, there's a difference because of the responsibility that the federal student aid program feels a student can have. So with the dependent student, the max you can borrow is $8,000 in unsubsidized. And for the independent student, the maximum you can borrow is $34,500 in unsubsidized Stafford loan. So that's why you see the two different combining subsidized and unsubsidized amounts. But that is over the course of your undergraduate career.
Okay, and we have a question from Joe here. It says, does this limit include loans and Pell Grant?
No, those are two different limits. You have your loan limits, and good question, you have your loan limits and you have your Pell Grant limits. Again, the Pell Grant limit is 600%. So there isn't a set dollar amount for Pell Grant eligibility, but there's a time frame of eligibility on the Pell Grant. On the loans, there is a slight time frame, but that's a little more in depth, and your financial aid counselors can go over that. But there is a amount difference. So that's where the difference is, but there are two separate limits.
Okay.
Good question.
An important distinction. All right, let's keep going here. So this is something that not everybody thinks about necessarily, but the federal government states, hey, you have to stay in having satisfactory academic process, or good standing, they call it. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yes, so that's a really good question. A lot of students aren't really aware of it. Just like you have academic requirements that must be met for, say, merit scholarships, federal student aid also has an academic requirement that must be met. Students must stay in good standing, and it's 3 different components that the federal student aid program has when talking about satisfactory academic progress. And what the acronym also, you may hear us interchange those words with the word SAP. So SAP, we don't want you to sap out. So you want to make sure that you're academically meeting the 3 components, and we'll go a little bit more into depth on those components, but there is academic requirements that must be met every year to determine eligibility and retention of the aid that you're receiving each year.
Okay, so let's go a little deeper into those 3 components. So first component, qualitative grade point average. Does that mean you just have to have a certain GPA range for a certain amount of courses? Is that right?
That is correct. And it depends on the hours that you're attempting, not the hours that you've completed, that determines eligibility or that you're meeting the GPA component. So if you're attempting 30 hours, meaning let's just say, for example, 15 hours for fall, 15 hours for spring, at the end of the spring, you want to make sure that your cumulative GPA is at least a 1.75. But we know our students will strive to give their best. But yes, so at 30 hours attempted, not completed, you want to make sure that you have a 1.75. So that's an example for one of the GPA requirements.
So they look at it year by year. Is that what you're saying? Okay.
You look at it on average year by year unless you are at risk. Then we look at you semester by semester until you're back on track.
Okay, great. All right, so the number 2 thing that they look at, quantitative completion rate. Tell us about that.
That is another one that's kind of tricky. So you're doing exceptionally well GPA-wise, but unfortunately, say for example, you had to drop a class or receive a W, or you didn't do your very best in that course. What federal student aid requires that our office do is we still have to count those hours. So again, that's what we mean when we say attempted. So although you may have received a W for that course, so it wasn't an unsatisfactory grade, it still counts towards consideration of eligibility for the next year. So for students, we want to make sure that you're completing of all the hours, at least 2/3 of your attempted hours. So for example, if you're attempting 12 hours in the fall and 12 hours in the spring, that's a total attention of 24 hours. So you want to make sure that you've completed at least 2/3 or 66% of those hours.
Okay. And then tell us about this maximum time issue.
Now that one is a big one, but it's simple. It's a simple mathematic thing. Students have, for an average bachelor's degree, roughly 120 hours to complete. Well, the government says that they know life happens, things happen, so they give you kind of a cushion of a full total completion time frame. So that time frame is 150%. So on average, if a bachelor's degree takes 120 hours, they give you a cushion of up to 180 hours of attention to obtain that bachelor's degree. So even if you're on the right track for that bachelor's, say you're doing a double bachelor's or 2 bachelor's, you want to be mindful of that because you have no more than 180 hours that you can attempt, not complete, in order before the government says, okay, you're not meeting that time frame.
Okay, so that was important, and I think it was, we were talking about this yesterday, Chantrella and I, and we say, 100% and 150% of time. So once again, this doesn't mean like time is in years, it means time is in like looking at credit hours as a portion. So
correct.
So like if you transferred into Tulane SoPA from another university and had a different major, and so some of those majors count as your electives here, but some of them maybe don't. And then you still have to take the 120 courses. So you say you would go over that. Right. So whatever you couldn't really transfer in would be a little bit over. And that's kind of what we have to be aware of too. And if you drop a lot of courses, those still count, right?
That is correct. That is a very good observation. That is correct. So transfer hours do count because they're counting towards your degree. So you definitely want to make sure that you're on track with that. So that's a very good observation. Yes, transfer hours do count. If they're going to be counted towards the degree in SoPA, you definitely want to make sure that you're within that 180 hours. The government just wants to make sure that you're on track and you're doing successfully well to obtain that degree.
Great. So we have another question here about scholarships available for students. So that wouldn't be Chantrella's department necessarily for SoPA students. Online, we do have a few scholarships available. Some of them are identified for particular types of students. So if you go to sopa.tulane.edu, we have information about scholarships that are specifically for SoPA students. There are a lot of scholarships that are available to students kind of nationally though. And so what I would always recommend is that you research that. And even in your local area, sometimes there are a lot of employers or local business leaders who give out scholarships to people who are specifically from that area. Do you have any more kind of recommendations about finding scholarships, Chantrella?
Yes, also you want to check not just online, but even civic organizations. They do provide that type of funding as well with scholarships. So just because, you know, you're in your first year, it doesn't mean that you don't qualify for scholarships. So we always encourage our students to review every year. There are scholarships for every classification from freshman to senior year. So don't ever stop reviewing or looking for scholarships.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. All right, we're going to keep going. So what happens if something happens, you know, life gets in the way and they are not experiencing satisfactory academic progress as defined by those factors? What happens?
Okay, so what happens is that the government does allow for students to appeal on the grounds that life has happened, things happen, and they're aware of that, and they've allowed us to be aware of that as well. So what students can do, what happens first is that you're not immediately told that you don't qualify. There is a warning period. And so we notify our students. That's why we encourage you to check your emails for Tulane, because we'll notify you that, hey, you're on warning, you're at risk. You know, you want to pull up either your GPA or you want to pull up your completion ratio or both. So we let you know ahead of time or at that time after the semester, most likely the fall, that you're at risk. And so you're allowed to get your financial aid that spring. And say, for example, at the end of the spring, unfortunately, it just still didn't work. What students are allowed to do is appeal, and you can basically explain your circumstance and the reason why you are not eligible or were not meeting the standards at the end of the spring. Just keep in mind that although you've submitted an appeal to our office on the grounds of whichever circumstance it may be, it doesn't guarantee that your appeal will be approved and you'll be allowed to get financial aid for future. But just keep in mind there is an opportunity to appeal.
Okay, great. I'm glad to hear that. That's definitely important.
Yeah.
All right, so enrollment changes and financial aid. This is something that comes up a lot. Sometimes people, they'll say, I want to take 4 classes this semester. I really want to make some progress. And then say they get a new assignment at work where they have this big thing that they have to do. And so they have to withdraw from one of the classes. Tell us how enrollment changes affect financial aid.
Yes, good question. And we understand that things happen. So what happens is, just keep in mind, we ask for that information on the SoPA addendum of the hours, but say you do have to change your hours or drop a class or withdraw from a class, just keep in mind, like I said again, it does impact your academic eligibility moving forward, but for that specific semester, dropping a class or changing your schedule will impact your financial aid, and it could jeopardize your eligibility moving forward. But right then and there in that semester, if we do have to adjust your aid, it could risk you having a balance due to the university, because what happens is we have to return the funding to the federal government.
Okay. So, and that's important to know. So within what period of time would they have to repay the balance in order to stay in good standing financially?
Well, that would be with accounts receivable, but what we're aware of, if you're going to return for the next semester, you definitely want to make that payment or make payment arrangements with accounts receivable before the closing of the semester. That way, when it's time to register for the next semester, you don't have any registration holes or anything like that.
Sounds great. Thank you. All right, moving forward. So this is a lot of information, a lot of things to keep track of. It's straightforward, but you know, there are some boxes you have to check carefully because it is a big investment in yourself. So tell us about how y'all created this undergraduate checklist and how it can help students through this process.
Yes, so everything that we kind of went over in this webinar today, we have comprised of just a little what we kind of call a checklist, and it gives students a step-by-step process of how they can get through from beginning to end with once you're accepted to university or before you're accepted, what your steps are leading up to us actually processing your aid and dispersing your funding. So we do have that information on our webpage. Again, it would be financialaid.tulane.edu, and then you would click on School of Professional Advancement and you'll see the checklist there.
Okay, great. Yeah, I love a checklist. I'm all about lists. This is a great
checks and balances.
right. So thank you so much, Chantrella. As she said, if you would like to contact your financial aid counselor, you just go on the financial aid website and it's by alphabetical order, last name, and you will see that counselor's information. If you are interested in the admissions process as a whole or have questions about the admissions process as a whole, please feel free to reach out to our executive director of admissions, who's Sheila Gold, and we have her email there. Her information is also available online. I wanted to check quickly before we leave. There's another question. Oh, so this is the most informative financial aid session I've ever encountered. Great.
Thank you.
Stuart Barrow, and I wish I had this guidance early. Oh, I'm so glad to hear that, Joe. Yeah, we want it to be very transparent, clear, make sure everybody knows exactly what they're getting into, because this is an investment. I mean, it's a significant investment, and we know what it means. I mean, money doesn't grow on trees. We think it's a great investment because it's an investment in yourself, but you have to be wise about it. And if I could just say one more thing, like really communicate with your financial aid counselor, because I worked with Chantrell and them really frequently, and they're always, you know, Chantrell is a former student. She knows how it goes too, so they're here to help you. So any other questions before we go? Like I said, if there's any more information that you might need, you can get it on our website. So I see somebody asked, can somebody send me a copy of this video? I'm at work and missed parts. Yes, we will work to email that to you. We have recorded it. So we will work to either get that through an email or we might be able to put it up on our YouTube site. So, but we'll get the information to you as soon as that's available. All right, any last words of wisdom, Chantrella?
Yes, just continue to progress forward. Check our website, make sure you check out that checklist for School of Professional Advancement. It won't steer you wrong. We are always here, we're always available. Email us, contact us by phone, and we also have walk-in hours. You don't have to set an appointment. We are here Monday through Friday, and someone is always available. So, yes.
Great. Thank you so much, everybody. And if there's any more information that you need, just let us know. Don't be afraid to reach out. Have a great day. Thanks, Chantrell.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.